Let's move on then to Stefano de Clara, who's here from IETA, where he's Director for International Policy. He's been with IETA for just over 5 years now. And well, here representing, I think, the private sector. Your members are all interested and infused by emissions trading. So what's important for you next week?
Great, and thank you for having me here. I hope you can see my my slides as well. So yeah, if you don't know, IETA, the International Emissions Trading Association, we are a non-for-profit business group that brings together companies from a wide range of different sectors that have an interest in promoting carbon markets and emissions trading as a way to put a price on carbon and as a way to reduce CO2 emissions. And we do see a huge potential under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement to do so, both at the international level, so to establish an international framework for carbon pricing and for carbon markets, as well as at the domestic level to promote further uptake of domestic emission trading systems and other ways of pricing carbon through market-based measures. If we move on to the first slide, of course, I mean, all of this is a purely theoretical potential right now, because we do have provisions under Article 6, but the negotiations to actually turn those provisions into a set of implementation rules are still ongoing, and will hopefully complete at least the first step in the process in a couple of weeks from now in Madrid. And just to articulate a bit further on why our members and the business community is so interested in Article 6. We all know that you know, under Article 6 you have provisions that will allow countries to cooperate on NDC achievement and to transfer the mitigation outcomes that will result from that cooperation. So it effectively outlines provisions for the creation of an accounting and reporting framework to do that and to reconcile those transfers with the achievement of the NDC. And as it was also pointed out, it also lays out provisions to establish a new mitigation mechanism under Article 6.4 to further facilitate the creation of project activities, the quantification of those actions, and the transfer of the resulting units. If we look at what this means for carbon markets and carbon prices, we can see that in the short term, if Article 6 is implemented and operationalized in an effective way, it could be a key international framework for carbon pricing and carbon markets broadly. Could facilitate, for example, the linkage of existing emission trading systems and carbon pricing policies. It could also facilitate the creation of carbon clubs, whereby some countries get together and cooperate on NDC achievement in a carbon club, and more importantly, can also be a key way to engage the business community and the private sector in the implementation of the NDC, and more generally in the mitigation action needed to meet the long-term goal of the Paris Agreement. We do see Article 6 as one of the key entry points for the business community in the implementation of the Paris Agreement. And this is more or less what it could do in the short term. But if we look at the longer term and what Article 6 could do in the longer run, still back to the previous slide, I think it's fair to assume that its importance will increase over time, because as we get closer to a situation where the world is entering or nearing a net zero pathway, Article 6 can be crucial to link the remaining emission sources that are still likely to exist in some countries or in some sectors, even as we get close to the half of the century, with countries that have the capacity of becoming a net sink of emissions, and will also provide the incentive for those parties to compensate any leftover emissions that will still be in some parts of the world or in some sectors of the economy. So effectively, Article 6 can be a key mean to get to net zero as quickly as possible, and also as cost effectively as possible. And on top of that, it can do much more than that. But I think these are the key reasons why the business community was really keen to have market provisions under the agreement in the run-up to COP21 in Paris, and has been focusing a lot on the implementation of Article 6 ever since. If we move on to the next slide, I just want to give you
to accelerate, because you've used up 5 minutes. So just
sorry, that went by quite quickly. This is just to provide you some key takeaways from a modeling exercise that we did together with the University of Maryland to try to quantify the potential of Article 6, and really, in a nutshell, based on the current NDCs, Article 6 or international markets under the Paris Agreement have the potential of reducing costs by 320 billions a year by 2030, which, if they're invested into additional mitigation, could result into an extra 5 billion tons a year by 2030, which means that if we go on to the next slide, this can both significantly lower the cost of meeting NDCs, and by reinvesting those cost savings, it can get us closer to the trajectory we need to be in order to meet the 2-degree or further down the 1.5-degree goal of the Paris Agreement. If we move on to the next slide and concluding real quick, what needs to happen in order to translate that potential into actual action in the real world will be to get good rules out of COP25, which means clear, practical, and simple rules that, as it was also outlined earlier, can ensure credibility, environmental integrity, and no double counting under Article 6. And it will also be important to start a work plan that will further define and work out the remaining technical issues, and that will just be the first step in the process, as then the implementation work in the real world will have to start to actually make that happen. If you want to find out more about our modeling project or our priorities, there are some links at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. One follow-up, which is we've started getting questions as well, asking about, well, a little bit what MJ was just talking about. How do we really ensure a net reduction in global emissions? So what, maybe a quick reaction from you on what MJ was talking about. So actually setting aside and canceling a part of the credits to ensure that there is a net reduction at global level. What's your view on that, Stefano?
If we talk specifically about OMG, we're not a big fan of the discounting option, and we prefer other ways to implement overall mitigation of global emissions under Article 6.4. I think it's also worth reminding that overall mitigation is a requirement under Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement, but it could be a bit of a distortion to extend it to Article 6.2 as well, as you know, there's no clear mandate under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, and it would lead to distortions for cases, you know, where you link emission trading systems, or where you have other approaches under Article 6.2. And I
So,
think
very concretely, how do you ensure that, as you say, the efficiency would allow for greater ambition? How do you ensure that that greater ambition is actually delivered?
Yeah, I think that would be the role of potentially a carbon club, whereby countries commit to raise ambition in order to trade in the club, or other construct like that. We don't think that artificially building a discounting option under Article 6.4 would actually deliver extra ambition in the system.